Разговарам со колегата Мајкл Боцјуркив, кој заедно со мене на почетокот на војната беше во Украина. Тој известува и за CNN, и за BBC, за уште неколку меѓународни медиуми и ја прати војната од самиот почеток. Во моментов живее во Одеса и поразговаравме за тоа каква е состојбата во моментов во Украина, што може да се очекува, но и генерално за пошироката глобална политика, каков импакт ќе има врз моменталните војни кои се случуваат секаде во светот. Michael, thank you very much for talking for my show. You're currently based in Ukraine, in Odessa.
Correct, in Odessa, yes.
So, can you tell me about the latest events? Because since Trump took power, it looks like the attacks on Kyiv, the attacks on Ukraine intensified.
Yeah.
So, did you expect this?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, but I call it World Port Odessa whenever I can. And the reason I do that is I always want to remind people that Odessa and its ports are an integral part of the global food supply chain. You get rid of Odessa, people in Cairo and in other countries, in other cities in Africa, are going to have a more difficult time feeding themselves. It's a huge, of course, exporter of wheat and sunflower oil. And I always say that if the war escalates even further through bombardment of ports in Ukraine or displacement of mass population, it will put pressure on neighboring countries. So the world should care about it. Right now, I'll give you the very latest. So I came from Kyiv just a few days ago, and I heard a very disturbing statistic from the East Europe Foundation. It's the largest INGO, non-governmental organization in Ukraine. And they estimate, based on also UN data, that if the Russians go through with an intensive summer offensive, it could move the front line as much as 60 kilometers. Also, within that point is what's happening is Mr. Putin's forces are creating so-called buffer zone in the Kharkiv and Sumy region, or trying to anyway. They're bombarding Kharkiv very heavily. Kharkiv still is the second biggest city in Ukraine, but it's very, very difficult for people there, Sumy as well. The front line is changing. The latest I read was that Russian forces are close to the border with Dnipropetrovsk already. Some key cities there that key villages that they want to get a hold of to push their offensive further. Anyway, going back to the feared Russian summer offensive, it could displace more than 200,000 people. If that happens, there's no way Ukraine alone can handle that big of an internally displaced population. So I believe they will seek safer haven in European countries. European countries should be aware of that and should be prepared. Above and beyond that, finally, is the nightly wave of drone attacks. You know, it was only a few weeks ago where experts said there's no way Russia will have the capability to resupply its drones, sending so much. Normally, it would be 100 or 200 a night. Now it's up to 500 in some nights. I was in Kyiv the other night where there was a very intensive 3-hour middle of the night attack. And it's the first time that I've heard drones overhead. And I was staying in the diplomatic quarter. That was scary. The same thing I've noticed in Odessa, where I live. I'm not going to say exactly where I live, but it's a pretty safe area. And when you hear the buzz of that drone overhead, the air defense systems are getting overwhelmed because the Russians are using everything from jamming technology to decoy drones, but also they're using a mix of drones and missiles. And what they'll do on a very intensive attack is they'll target multiple cities. Ukraine is not the size of Israel, which is the size of New Jersey. Ukraine is the size of France. It's a big, big area to protect. But key cities, key infrastructure need to be protected. Since Trump came in, you asked, there has been, I call him the contortionist in chief, because what he can say one day can be twisted the next day or even the same day. So it's very, very difficult to determine what his policy is. But on the way here, I read a statement by the Secretary of Defense who said that aid will be massively reduced to Ukraine. The big concern, of course, are Patriot missiles that are the only ones that can shoot down incoming ballistic missiles, but also intelligence sharing. And that is already on top of the withdrawal of USAID aid. Since February 2022, Ukraine was the biggest recipient anywhere in the world of USAID aid. That has caused massive problems across Ukraine. Not in very good shape.
Well, Trump basically promised he will resolve this war in 24 hours. It's not just that it did not happen, but as I mentioned, the attacks on Ukraine intensified. So is Putin and Russia encouraged by the Trump?
Well, I think Trump also promised his wife he wouldn't run again for a second term. Well, look, I'll go back to the statement he said the other day, which I think was highly irresponsible, is that these are two sides that they should be allowed to fight it out. Let's see who wins. I mean, this is only encouraging Mr. Putin to go further because there is no statement of deterrence in that saying, Vladimir, if you do this is what you're going to pay the price. So Putin doesn't see any downside to intensifying. This is a man who is prepared to sacrifice his own people. He's prepared for, basically Russia is a war economy right now. If the war were to suddenly stop, it would cause a lot of problems for Russia. Their economy right now is basically the size of the Netherlands. It's not big. And I think we're always trying to think, what is the thinking of Mr. Trump? What is his motivation? I think he has this fantasy that if relations between Russia and the United States were to be reset, it would create huge economic benefits for the U.S. The Russian economy is hardly growing. The Polish economy is growing at many times faster. He should do an economic deal with Poland. So, I've said this many, many times, is that at the moment we're in a very dangerous phase because there are no solid red lines being enforced by the United States. There are only gray lines. Autocrats like Mr. Putin love that because this is a void where he can press forward, and see how far he can go. Now, having said that, there is a glimmer of hope, if you can call it that. What we saw in the past few days of Ukraine doing multiple simultaneous strikes on Russian airfields where strategic bombers are located, what we saw with the third attack on the Kerch Bridge, what we saw last summer with Ukraine's audacious invasion of the Kursk region. I mean, this is amazing. And I said just the other day on one of the bigger networks, I said, not everything here meets the eye. There's something strange going on. And I don't think I'm exaggerating where I suspect that we know there's incompetence and corruption within the Russian armed forces, but I think within the intelligence services to allow the Ukrainians basically to stroll over the border and take over Russian territory the first time since, I think, World War II is unthinkable. Probably a mix of incompetence, but also maybe even insubordination. People looking the other way and allowing this to happen. If that is the case, and I'm right, that creates very, very big problems for Mr. Putin. And I wouldn't be surprised if his paranoia has shot way up, especially after these multiple attacks on the airfields. That is why he had to bring in a human shield for the Victory Day parade in the form of Xi Jinping from China.
Yes. So what is your assessment about the end of the war? There was in between some kind of agreement between the United States and Ukraine about the rare minerals or the resources. So what do you think about that agreement, and how can that agreement influence in ending the war?
I haven't heard any Ukrainian even talk about that agreement. You're the first one to bring it up in weeks. It's something that came and went. And it's not an agreement. It's basically a memorandum of understanding. If you read it, both parties have agreed to do this, and this. For it to be fully implemented, Kira Rudik, the head of the Halos party, said that it would take in her words, tectonic changes in Ukrainian legislation for this to happen. Mr. Trump has this fantasy that if you put American contractors in Ukraine, it will be like a human shield for Russia. I don't think so. The problem right now is that Ukraine is insisting on at least a 30-day ceasefire for proper talks to happen. Russia is saying, no, we want this, this, and this, and then we can talk about ceasefire. The problem with Russia's this, and this, their list of demands is unacceptable to any Ukrainian president. They include full control of the 4 oblasts it only partially controls, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson. It includes Ukraine renouncing its NATO bid. It includes international recognition for Crimea. It includes also, I think, reductions in the Ukrainian armed forces. And then finally, Russia is saying, we want you to cancel all of your claims for reparations. The total reconstruction bill for Ukraine right now from the war is heading towards $1 trillion. Related to that is, I think what the EU should do, and I think the EU is a collection of some of the most incompetent bureaucrats and leaders the world has seen, but I think what they should do is grow the, I have to watch my language, anyway, grow the fortitude to say, okay, Russia, you don't want to pay reparations, we're going to take that $300 billion in frozen assets, the principal, not the interest is being partially used, to put in a Ukraine reconstruction fund and to help Ukraine buy weapons. I talk to a lot of Ukrainians and they're tired of EU leaders coming to Kiev to do selfies with Zelensky, a lot of blah, blah, blah. And I'll give you another example. I mean, Kayas, I always get the former leader of Estonia, now foreign affairs chief of the EU. When the United States threatened to cut off funding to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, she says, oh my goodness, I have such fond memories of them, when we were under Soviet occupation. And now I just learned yesterday at this festival that instead of promising to save Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, they're only giving a pittance of its budget, a small fraction. That's an example of their impotence, their incompetence.
What do you think about European role since the beginning of the war? Because till now, till the Trump winning the election, somehow Ukrainians relied on U.S. help.
Right.
Now they are basically left only to Europeans. So were Europeans wrong that gave the U.S. basically the primate in this previous year?
Yeah. We talked about this a lot 2 weeks ago at the Black Sea Security Forum in Odessa. And it was widely acknowledged then that Ukraine cannot suddenly switch from US to European support. I mean, if you think there was a lot of praise for the assistance the United Kingdom has given to Ukraine, but then there was a lot of criticism of Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, for walking back comments. We're going to have a coalition of the willing. We're going to, do this, this, and this. We're going to, he even suggested, along with Macron, putting boots on the ground. And now he's walking back those statements. This has been noticed in Ukraine. He realizes two things. Number one, their political will isn't there, but number two is, in fairness to them and to a lot of jurisdictions, including Canada, is there are a lot of competing demands. The healthcare system is crumbling. The housing crisis. They cannot suddenly go from 2 to 2.5% of GDP for NATO contribution, or to 3%. The head of NATO, Mark Rutte, said the other day, hey, United Kingdom, if you don't take this seriously, you guys are going to be learning Russian before long. I don't believe that, but his message was clear. I always say one of my favorite words that have gotten quoted is words don't stop Russian missiles the way patriots do. So enough talk, come up with the goods. Even the new Chancellor of Germany had said, or at least indicated, that Germany would start shipping the Taurus missiles. These are very, very smart missiles that Ukraine needs and wants. And now that's been walked back a little bit because he's a coalition leader. He doesn't have the political support. Zelensky and him did make a quiet agreement. We don't know the details too, but it does include more assistance to Ukraine to do domestic production. I think that is a very positive aspect of all of this, is the Ukraine's smart drone production is going through the roof. What they were able to do with technology to hit those 4 to 6 Russian air bases simultaneously is absolutely mind-blowing. They're rewriting the rules of war. A lot of other countries are watching this. We're heading towards a new phase of our lives where wars are going to be fought less with bullets and tanks, but more with modern technology. So on that sense, Ukraine is getting into a stronger footing, but it also has problems on the front line, lack of men. A lot of those who are fighting have been there since the start of the war. They're of advanced age. And Mr. Zelensky, I don't think, feels he has the domestic support to do a wider mobilization.
So at the end, I have to ask about the global context, because you have experience also with the Middle East.
Yeah.
Working in Gaza, Afghanistan, a lot of those countries. So we are living in very, very weird times. We did not expect that a lot of wars will be raging around the world. So where are we going, and what do you expect to happen? I mean, we have 2 big wars raging, and we have from time to time some other country, like another threats for a war, for example, India, Pakistan.
Right.
We had that as well. So where is this world going?
Yeah.
And what is, and just yesterday we had a huge attacks, another war basically between Israel and Iran. So
of course, which the United States said they didn't know would happen.
Yes.
Well,
So
I think we should prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. You mentioned India and Pakistan. I seriously believe that, and I was in a briefing with diplomats, close-door briefing with diplomats the other day in Kiev, and they all nodded when I said this, is that if the U.S. was still playing the role of global policeman, that escalation between India and Pakistan would have never happened. I think the U.S. would have stepped in and said, hey, boys and girls, stop it. We're going to come in and mediate. That was a very, it goes to show how tensions that exist, which are beneath the surface, can suddenly erupt. What is happening with Iran right now is very, very scary. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem were both hit last night. Airspace closed all over the place. Again, the immediate response from the Trump administration was, well, we didn't know about this. Well, Netanyahu is someone who is a desperate man. He's very unpredictable. I think he's a dangerous man. A lot of his actions right now is to just take away attention from himself, to delay his trial and possible imprisonment. And this is not only me saying this. I was in Israel a few weeks after the Hamas attack, and I had a lot of Israelis telling me he's personally responsible for what happened. He needs to be held to account. But he's a rogue leader who wants to cut off the legs of the Iranian regime. Now, they do support Hamas. They do support the Houthi rebels, Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's they have proxies that have a lot of weaponry. I mean, God forbid that Hezbollah should unleash their huge stockpile of weapons onto Israel. Look where this is going to go. We're in a very, very precarious moment right now. But like that, India, Pakistan, Ukraine, if
Israel,
you no longer have the United States as the world enforcer of the rules-based international order, it's in big, where I posted this yesterday, it feels like we're in free fall. Let's hope that they come to their senses, but what happened in Iran was very, very interesting. There was even Israeli video going around of Israeli commandos on the ground there. I do believe that, like the Ukrainians are suspected to have operatives in Russia to pull off what they did, the Israelis probably have that too in Iran. The assassinations that have happened over the past year or two just couldn't happen. Informers, things like that. But what we're also saying is there's a limit to the Iron Dome technology. I do have friends in Israel, and I read their daily posts, and they're very, very fearful. It reminds me sometimes of what's happening in Ukraine, where you're in the bomb shelters a few times every day. You don't know if your kid could go to school and make it back safely. It's really, really changing things. And I think Netanyahu, who lives in a bubble, doesn't understand this, and this could come back to haunt him. And then the other thing is, imagine the remaining hostages, Israeli hostages in Gaza, even if they're still alive, what Hamas may do in retaliation for this. The families are very, very worried, as they should be.
Yeah, so when do you expect this war to end, or do you expect it to have even bigger escalation? Because we keep talking like unofficially off the record about World War III.
Yeah.
So are we on the edge of World War III?
Well, you know, one of the fears in the past while has been the retaliation that we can expect from Putin in regards to that multiple Ukrainian attack on the Russian air bases. There is heightened fears that he might use tactical nuclear weapons. If that were to happen, and if we are to believe NATO leaders, the response will be huge. We have to remind people that tactical nuclear weapons are used in a very small area, but it's the precedent that is set. We have heard from European leaders that the Russian army bases will be decimated all at once. But what I fear right now, like I was saying earlier, is there's not much deterrent. And I think Putin is unhinged. I think there are other world leaders who have access to very scary weaponry that are also unhinged. I do like to think that the reason Mr. Putin has not yet used tactical nuclear weapons is because China told him not to do it. They realize how this could get out of control. But that raises another point, is we are seeing a shift in kind of the major influencers of the world. Is it shifting from Washington to Beijing, to Riyadh, to Delhi? Are they going to be the new kind of enforcers of the rule of law? I don't know. But we see what's happening in Asia Pacific. China is taking a much, much more engagement where the U.S. is withdrawing or not present elsewhere in Africa. So that's, I think, what we can, sad to say, our best hope right now.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.